A golden wheat field swayed in the wind. Sunlight poured down, clear and bright, warm and dazzling. Grace, do you remember the vow you made last time as the future Duchess of Taylor? Grace, standing amid the rolling wheat, Taylor's golden hair fluttering in the wind, he answered softly, yes. Father would never allow anyone in the Taylor domain to go hungry. Joseph drew his daughter into his arms. That's right. He pointed into the distance. Look, that is the land you will one day rule. The price of possessing these vast wheat fields. That is that you must bear the responsibilities and duties that come with them. Protect the land passed down by our ancestors and the people of the domain who trust us. Do you understand? Grace nodded in his embrace. Yes, Father. I will protect Taylor. I will protect our precious land. Flames devoured the wheat field with crackling roars. The sky was stained blood red. Villagers gathered around bonfires. Their faces were filled with despair. Grace stood by the window, silently staring out at the land that had once been golden. Then she abruptly drew the curtains, shutting out the hellish scene outside. Grace turned and walked to her desk. It was piled high with documents and ledgers. My lady, a maid burst in. Grace lifted her eyes. What is it? The maid was panting. Something terrible has happened. The young master of House Saxon, Jack, he came barging in drunk. Hey, Jess. Jack, reeking of alcohol, slurred out an order. Do I have to tell you to come sit beside me? A man who looked like a butler rushed forward and knelt beside Jack. Please forgive him. Please calm your anger. Please let go of Jesse first. Jack suddenly poured wine over his head. A mere servant dares to speak without permission? Whatever your master orders you to do is what you should do. Grace's voice rang out coldly. Young master of House Saxon, it is late. You should return now. Jack turned toward the voice. Jesse and the butler also lifted their heads in surprise. My lady. Jack's cheeks flushed red. My lady, that woman. She's Grace. Grace Taylor. Jack's gaze swept over her greedily. She was worth the price. In a mocking tone, he said, so the fiancée of the Taylor family finally graces us with her presence. You kept hiding and refusing to show yourself. Good timing. Your servants are far too rude. I was just about to teach them a lesson. Jack raised his wine glass. But a servant's mistake is the master's mistake too, isn't it? If you pour me a drink and apologize, I'll forgive this rudeness. Jesse and the butler looked at him in horror. Grace wore a smile. Butler, Jesse, I'll have a proper talk with the young master. You may leave. The butler looked at her hesitantly. My lady. Jesse also looked full of worry, but in the end they both answered softly, yes, my lady. Jack leaned closer to Grace, a frivolous smile on his face. Lady Taylor of House Saxon. Sounds dreadfully dull, doesn't it? I've always wondered why our illustrious family has to marry someone from House Taylor. A family that once owned golden wheat fields, the foundation of the Second Empire, and now has fallen this low. Your parents must be heartbroken. Grace stood in the mausoleum, holding a bouquet of white flowers, gazing at the graves before her. They would probably blame me as well. They would ask what I was doing to let things come this far. My parents were the Duke and Duchess of Taylor. This is no longer your home. The current master of the duchy is the new Duke. Stop wasting my time. Just sign already. Mother, father, I have been holding my breath and struggling to survive. Even as everything was taken from me again and again, I remained silent, holding my breath, waiting for the right time. In the end, I will protect Taylor. I will protect our precious land. Who would spend money on that? Though, since she's marrying the queen's nephew, I was curious what outrageous thing he might do. He actually made accounts family marry without even demanding a dowry. Instead, they're paying off the Taylor family's debts. Now I understand. Jack's face reddened with rage. Are you insane? Grace looked at him coldly. I think the one who's truly insane is the man who gets dead drunk in another family's territory on the night before the wedding. Jack flew into a rage and raised his hand to strike her. Shut up. Grace turned sideways and dodged. Jack stepped on a bottle. His foot slipped, and he slammed into the edge of the table with a groan. Grace picked up the wine bottle from the table. Mother, father, I still have something to say. Jack looked up in terror. What? You're not planning to hit me with that, are you? Grace's gaze was calm and steady. I held my breath and sharpened the blade. At last, it is time to raise that blade. She lifted the bottle. If you bite your tongue, you can die. Jack stared at her in horror. And no, don't. Grace's voice held not a trace of warmth. Clench your teeth. Hoofbeats rang crisply across a moonlit sea of flowers. We finally arrived. The knight beside him asked softly, what exactly was in that invitation to make you come here the moment you returned from the Wall of Death? I'm curious whether it was truly an invitation at all. On the stationery was Grace's elegant hand. To the Honorable Duke Walter Reisman, if you attend my wedding, I will place Taylor's future in your hands and become the sharpest blade guarding your secret. Signed, Grace Taylor. Grace lightly touched her golden hair. As expected, seeing it in person really is different. Mother, Lady Cornwall, how do I look? 2 names were engraved on the mirror frame. Lady Cornwall smiled. You are beautiful, my lady. That's enough, Rosette. You're already beautiful. Rosette lowered her eyes. But this is Grace's wedding. I want to dress beautifully and go congratulate her. Truly congratulate her on being sold off to House Saxon. Yes, to marry Jack Saxon. All the debts we owe House Saxon will be erased forever. What a joyous occasion. Tomorrow, that hateful True Taylor will disappear. And then, Rosette, this castle will truly belong to you. Grace sat before her dressing table, sunlight pouring through the window onto her as she quietly read the document in her hand. My lady, it is time to put on your veil. Grace set down the document and answered softly, all right, a bride still working at the very last moment before her wedding. I've never heard of such a thing. Grace closed her eyes, wearing a faintly weary smile. If you do everything you can until the very end, you'll feel a little lighter too. Worry flickered in the maid's eyes. My lady, are you really all right? A voice announced from outside the door. The Duchess and Lady Rosette have arrived. Grace looked at the noblewoman and Rosette before her. You've come, of course. After all, we raised you. I wanted to give you a few final words before you left this world of ours. So, I came personally. The noblewoman opened her folding fan and softly called, Grace. She leaned close to Grace's ear, her voice cold as iron. Do not make any rash moves. Restore our Taylor alliance. Even if your husband brings home a bastard child, even if he beats you, you must endure it. Under no circumstances should you think of asking us for help. Aren't you good at enduring? No matter what happens. The tip of the fan pressed against Grace's throat. Live well. Grace kept her eyes closed, a meek smile on her face. I will remember. Rosette turned away. Yes, go on living with that foolish smile on your face. Even if you die, do not ever return under the name of Taylor. This is our home. I should go now. The maid looked at her, eyes full of concern. My lady, no, this is only the beginning. I cannot break down here. The only time I was ever allowed to cry, the only time I was ever granted that right. Grace turned her back to the maid. Thank you for everything until now. She stepped toward the doors, toward that light. It is time. It is time for Grace of House Taylor to return to the church. The church glittered magnificently. The guests whispered among themselves. Good heavens, why is his face so badly bruised? I heard he's a brute. Looks like it's true. Serves her right for marrying a husband like that. My handsome son's face. Jack stood before the altar, obvious injuries on his face. Damn it, I don't remember anything from last night. My head feels like it's splitting open. He looked toward the church entrance. H.M., bathed in light. Grace slowly walked in wearing a pure white wedding gown and carrying a bouquet. Her golden hair was pinned up, and her green eyes were calm as still water. The guests murmured, she looks just like the late Duke and Duchess. How tragic. Jack stared, spellbound. Wow. The guests craned their necks. Look at the groom. He can't take his eyes off the bride. He's practically drooling. Walter murmured a reminder. Joseph, watch your mouth. Even the Archbishop is looking at you. To the Honorable Duke Walter Reisman, if you attend my wedding, I will place the sharpest blade in your hands. I can assure you that blade will be the most useful weapon in the hunt you are preparing. Signed, Grace Taylor. That seemingly fragile woman was the one who had sent that invitation. What exactly was she plotting? The Archbishop's voice echoed through the church. Jack Saxon, do you take Grace Taylor as your wife? And will you love her truly for the rest of your life? Jack flashed a grin. Yes, Ido. The Archbishop turned to Grace. Grace Taylor, do you take Jack Saxon as your husband? And will you love him truly for the rest of your life? Grace's eyes were empty, without the slightest ripple. She looked out the window. The sunlight was blinding. My lady, you possess an excellent weapon. When hunting prey stronger than yourself, you must never appear stronger than your opponent. Hide your schemes beneath your smile and your fighting spirit within your arms. Once you have completely lowered your opponent's guard, deliver the fatal blow. Grace lifted her head and looked straight at Jack. No, I love someone else. So, Jack Saxon, I cannot love even a single strand of your hair. Walter watched her, a faint smile curling at his lips. His arms were crossed, as though he had long been waiting for this spectacle. Wait, Countess, the debt remission will be void as well. I absolutely will not allow this marriage. How dare you present such a vulgar woman as a bride? We're leaving, dear. Jack, wait. Is no one here? Stop that couple's carriage at once. Grace, where are you going, Grace? You have been expelled from House Taylor. Grace stood there without moving. She turned her face slightly, her hollow gaze cast into the distance. Walter stared at her back, his expression complicated. Joseph hurried up from behind him, visibly flustered. "Your Highness, your sudden departure startled us. The Duke of Taylor is causing a scene in the church." He stopped the Count and Countess's carriage. Walter did not look back. "Let's go. If she says Hell has placed a weapon in my hand, then I'll go and take it." Joseph looked up. "What? You've suddenly decided to become a weapons merchant?" The blade and the invitation meant herself. "That means she intends to place herself in my hands. You said you would protect my secret." "Grace, just how much do you know about me?" Footsteps echoed on the stone stairs. Holding up her skirt, Grace climbed the dark staircase step by step. She stopped and looked up. A woman holding a lantern was waiting for her. The woman lifted her head, wearing a faint smile. Lady Cornwall. She held out her hand and tightly clasped Grace's. She led Grace through a brightly lit corridor. "Everything is ready, my lady." Lady Cornwall knelt on one knee, hand over her chest. "At last, the moment has come." Grace slightly extended her hand. "Yes, Lady Cornwall. The moment we have waited for all these years has finally arrived. Lady Cornwall, I need your help to take back House Taylor." Fire burned in Grace's eyes. "He is on the top floor of the Maxwell Inn, 4th Alley. Jesse will join us later." The cloaked figure pushed the door open without hesitation. Beneath the cloak were her pure white dress and resolute eyes. The carriage wheels rolled on, crushing the dust of memory. Earlier, that man I passed in the hallway. We had not exchanged a single word, but I recognized him at once. His innate nobility could not be hidden, not even in that dark corridor. He was the one who could help me. He was essential to my revenge. The Maxwell Inn sign gleamed in the sunlight. Walter pushed open the door, Joseph following close behind. Joseph looked around. It was lively this morning, but now there's no one here. He turned to Walter in confusion. "Are they not doing business today?" A cold smile touched Walter's lips. "As I thought, she already knew I would come here. I knocked the moment I entered." Walter gripped the doorknob and turned it gently. He stepped inside. Grace sat by the window with her back to him. Walter's gaze settled on her. She sat there perfectly still, like a statue. Grace slowly turned around. Her golden eyes met his gaze. Sunlight filtered through the diamond-paned glass in the door, scattering mottled shadows. She held a piece of dark cloth in both hands. A family crest was printed on it. She closed her eyes, a smile touching her lips. Everything is in place. In the night, a carriage raced along a forest path, its wheels rumbling dully toward an unknown fate. The Duke and Duchess Reisman died in a carriage accident, and their heir, the young Duke Reisman, as well. Was that really His Highness? Duke Reisman said he would act in advance to avoid the Queen. His Highness should be safe. It must be true. It has to be the young Duke Reisman's, because the young Duke looked too much like His Highness the Crown Prince. How tragic. He looked up at the man and woman beside him. "Mother," a little girl asked softly. "Grace, are you awake?" Grace rubbed her sleepy eyes. "What happened?" The woman bent down and gently cupped her face. "Nothing. Mother woke you, that's all. Go back to sleep." Grace's cheek was lightly stroked. She looked at the woman with childish confusion. "We still have a long way to the funeral hall." Suddenly, the carriage jolted violently, and a shrill scream tore through the night. "Luciana! Grace! Are you all right?" The man held the woman and Grace tightly. The woman asked urgently, "I'm fine." "Arthur, what about you?" The man answered, "I'm fine too. I'll go see what's happening. Stay here." He pushed open the carriage door and looked out in confusion. "What happened? Why did we suddenly stop?" His pupils contracted sharply. "Why, you are one of His Highness the Crown Prince's knights." The knight staggered a step, clutching his chest in pain. "Run!" Seeing that, the man hurried forward to support him. "Hey, are you all right?" "The faceless. They've come. Please go now." He pulled a piece of cloth from his coat. "Please, take this. The true Crown Prince is under the protection of the Duchess Reisman. Grace, take this and return to Taylor Castle." Grace looked up, tears filling her eyes. "But what about father and mother?" The woman forced back her grief and gave a gentle smile. "We'll follow soon. Don't worry. Please take care of Grace." "Yes, my lady," he said softly to the girl in his arms. "My lady, I will escort you." A tear slid from Grace's eye. "No." Grace's cries echoed through the woods. "Mother! Father!" Behind her, the carriage was swallowed in flames in an instant. The fire blazed into the sky. Grace stood before her parents' tomb, holding lilies, tears falling soundlessly. The guests whispered. "They say the Duke and Duchess of Taylor's carriage was completely burned as well." "Yes, the Reisman family, His Highness the Crown Prince, even the Taylor family." "What on earth happened?" Everything became a mess. A figure approached her. "Child, if you do not want to end up like your parents, then hold your breath and live quietly." Grace's body trembled violently. "Do you understand?" Grace's pupils quivered. The door opened. Walter walked in. Grace immediately stood up. Walter's tone carried a trace of understanding. So you knew I was staying here. Grace lowered her head. Please forgive my discourtesy. He sat down and examined the woman before him. Are you the one who called yourself the sharpest blade? Grace lifted her head, gaze unwavering. Yes. Walter's eyes were sharp as knives. On what grounds do you claim to know me? I asked you to come in person precisely to prove that. Grace did not retreat in the slightest. Of course, Your Highness. Walter's pupils shrank abruptly. What? A flash of alarm crossed Walter's eyes. You have a lot of nerve. Grace dropped her knees. Walter looked momentarily stunned. Grace raised her head, holding out that blood-stained cloth in both hands. On the cloth were the ashes of the Reisman family. Walter's gaze fell on the ashes. Then Grace's voice rang out, clear and powerful. On a road to the capital with my parents, after hearing of the Crown Prince's death, I met a knight whose face had been destroyed beyond recognition. Grace's voice echoed through the empty room. Before he died, that knight entrusted his last words to my parents. The true Crown Prince is being protected by the Duchess of House Reisman. Walter's expression froze. He clenched the cloth so tightly that his fingertips turned white. On that very day, my parents also became blackened ashes. Your Highness, Grace lifted her head, her gaze burning with conviction. Please use me as your sword of revenge. Wield me as you wish until the day you reclaim the throne. I swear I will become your blade. Her eyes shone with a fierce light. It was a quiet, burning fury. Yes, this woman. She had set fire to the home she should have returned to with her own hands, like a general burning his own ships and charging the enemy without hesitation. Walter folded his arms. And how exactly am I supposed to wield a sword like you? Grace looked up, a smile spreading across her face. It's simple. Your Highness only needs to fall in love with me in front of everyone. Please let me become your legitimate lover. Grace tilted up her face, eyes resolute. Let me become your acknowledged lover. Then take me to Reisman. Walter's gaze darkened. So let me confirm. The role you wish to play is that secret lover I publicly declared today in the chapel. Walter leaned in close, their breaths mingling. Why not simply ask me to marry you? Grace shook her head. No, marriage is too troublesome. I only need a proper excuse to remain by your side. Your Highness, if you wish to reclaim the place that was originally yours, you need the power of Reisman and House Taylor. Acknowledge me as the sole surviving bloodline of House Taylor, and I will place both families in your palm. Walter's eyes sharpened. You make it sound easy. House Taylor is currently under the complete control of Baron Ronan and his wife. And you, a woman who was almost sold off to pay debts, ran away at your own wedding, did you not? A blade's true killing power is not always visible to the eye. Just as your Highness has been lying hidden in the shadows, I too have honed myself into a blade worth using. She extended her hand. Listen carefully. Walter suddenly caught the back of her head and forced her to look up. I hate people who quit halfway. Pretending leaves weaknesses, but you freeze from something as simple as being touched. That makes me question whether you truly possess a blade's resolve. Resolve, that word. I have carved it into my heart hundreds of times each day, watching my family fall apart, watching the wheat fields turn to cinders. The day my parents were buried, threatened by a faceless shadow. Little girl, if you want to live, you must be as quiet and unseen as the dead. I once feared like a fool and did not even dare to look back. I hated that helpless self, that self who could only cry. Again and again, again and again. Was that not the vow I once made to myself? Grace lifted her head and steadied her gaze on Walter. A slight curve touched Grace's lips. The question is, Your Highness, do you possess that same resolve? A smile flickered over Walter's mouth. Well said. A blade sharpened too, well, often cuts the hand that holds it. However, Walter crossed his arms, something amused in his eyes. Very well. Let me hear your plan. How do you intend to use my affection as cover to seize control of Reisman? And how do you plan to reclaim House Taylor? What if I'm cut by the blade? As long as I can force my enemies to kneel, what does it matter? At the Taylor family castle, a man roared, "Damn it, they're demanding immediate repayment. Those bastards from House Saxon." He lunged toward a richly dressed woman. Hand over all your jewelry. Now, the woman recoiled in terror. No. Do you know how hard I worked to collect all this? The man bellowed. Who cares? And Grace, that hateful brat, where is she? I can't find her anywhere. The woman trembled. Can't we just sell the estate? It's so large, it would surely cover the debt. The two argued face to face, their voices echoing through the empty room. According to imperial law, aristocratic estates cannot be privately sold. How dare you? You bastard, showing up only now, Cornwall. Lady Cornwall entered the hall, hands folded before her, calm-faced. My apologies. I was delayed while looking through the documents concerning your debts. Forget that. Go find Grace. Drag her here immediately. Lady Cornwall gave a slight curtsy. Please calm yourself, my lord. Lady Grace's disappearance may actually be a blessing in disguise. What did you say? The Count Saxon family are relatives of the Queen. The farce at the wedding was no different from insulting Her Majesty. If we act carelessly, the Queen's wrath will burn straight toward House Taylor. The man went pale, cold all over. Then, what should we do? Lady Cornwall's voice was calm and merciless. Expel Grace from the family. Prove to Her Majesty and to the world that House Taylor has nothing to do with her shameful behavior. If she alone bears all the blame, Grace will be ruined and the Taylor estate will belong entirely to you, my lord. Greedy smiles instantly spread across both their faces. The man burst into laughter. I knew it. The gods are on my side. The ducal lands will finally truly belong to us. Dear Lady Cornwall, see to it at once. A glint flashed in Lady Cornwall's eyes. As you command, my lord. Leave everything to me. Sunlight filtered through leaves, casting mottled patterns. The carriage jolted along the country road. Jack sat inside, chin resting on his hand. I could never love Jack Saxon. I heard she was a meek little princess who had never stepped outside the castle, not even once. But she had a secret lover all along. Could it be that she's with him now? Jack sat in the carriage, eyes dark, and I was pushed into the gutter. A twisted smile crossed his face. And that bastard too. I'll find both of you. Right in front of your eyes, I'll tear it all to pieces. And then, I wonder whether I'll get to see tears in those pretty eyes of yours. Jack brushed his lips lightly. Grace. Grace Taylor. He murmured the name under his breath. I even like the sound of that name. At the Maxwell Inn, Joseph stood by the stairs, hands behind his back, after waiting for a very long time. What on earth are they talking about? Curiosity is driving me insane. At this rate, your neck is going to snap. Joseph suddenly drew his sword. A cold flash of steel pressed against a strange woman's throat. A woman. Joseph's eyes were icy. Who are you? State your name. Or else. She met Joseph's gaze without fear. Or else what? You'll run me through? Go on then. Stab me. Do it. Joseph stared, dumbfounded. We've never met, yet you bark orders at me and draw your sword first. She took a step closer. So this is what you all are, brutes. Joseph hurriedly sheathed his sword. No, that's not what I meant. May I ask, are you Jessie? Grace came down the stairs. Walter followed behind her. Grace's voice carried some relief. Taylor Castle must be in complete chaos by now. I'm glad you were able to get away safely. She turned slightly and introduced the woman at her side to Joseph. This is Jessie. Starting today, she will remain by my side and help me. Jessie gave a slight bow. I'm Lady Grace's maid. I'm also her instructor. She is the one who taught me courage. The corner of Joseph's mouth lifted faintly. You've got guts. Walter turned to Joseph. This is my adjutant, Joseph Rexton. Joseph sheathed his sword completely and stood up straight. Grace smiled at him. It is a pleasure to meet you, Sir Joseph Rexton. From now on, I look forward to working with you. Joseph blinked in confusion. I see. From this point forward, Walter announced with his arms crossed over his chest, his expression grave, Lady Grace will accompany me to Reisman as my lover. Joseph was stunned. What? Walter walked off without even turning his head. What are you standing there for? You drive the carriage. We leave at once. Joseph hurried after him. No, you need to give me a proper explanation. Sir Joseph, I'm very sorry to make such an excellent knight drive the carriage. Joseph suddenly froze. My lady is far too kind. He spun around. No, not at all. My original dream was to become a coachman. Jessie stared blankly, her face full of confusion. A faint smile tugged at Walter's lips. The carriage rolled on. Walter rode on horseback and looked back toward the carriage. My lady, is your wrist all right? Grace's voice came from inside. It still hurts a little. Judging from the Viscount's injuries, the bottle you chose was too thick. You should have picked one better suited to the job. Jack's injuries flashed through Walter's mind, and a smile curled at his lips. Those marks were your handiwork, my lady. Inside the carriage, Jessie suddenly swung her arm. When you strike, use your whole arm. Grace answered firmly. The next time I see that man, one bottle won't be enough to settle it. Jessie gripped Grace's wrist. My lady, this is only the beginning. A confident smile lifted Jessie's lips. Grace called softly, Jessie, don't worry. I have only taken the first step. To reclaim that land, I will not stop, and I will not fall from exhaustion. Jessie held Grace's hand tightly. Yes, my lady. Grace's gaze sank deep. Then, Jessie, let everyone know. I have made my move. Jessie placed a hand over her chest. Understood. She abruptly threw open the carriage door. She leapt down from the moving carriage and landed steadily. Joseph was aghast. What? She just jumped off without any hesitation. Walter watched silently. She said she would become a blade. It seems that was no empty boast. Grace sat inside the carriage, sunlight falling through the window onto her. Her eyes were closed, her expression serene. Beside her, Joseph looked utterly stunned. Walter's gaze sharpened. Yes, he turned his head. It seems they've already prepared a welcoming ceremony for us. Black feathers drifted down from the sky like an ominous sign. The carriage jolted onward through the night. A knight stared ahead warily. My lord, they've returned. Walter rode his black horse, posture straight and commanding. We're back. Grace Taylor stepped out of the carriage, wrapped in a cloak, like a sacred statue beneath the moonlight. The knights whispered among themselves, their eyes fixed on her. And this is... Walter drew Grace protectively before him. Holding her hand, he declared to everyone, welcome her. She's my lover. The knights froze solid, jaws nearly dropping. What? The sudden declaration struck the silent camp like thunder. The knights whispered among themselves. The commander's lover, a lady raised in luxury, actually followed him all the way to this harsh place. She must love him deeply. If she really loved him, she should have stayed quietly in a mansion. Sooner or later, she'll become a burden to him. Grace lifted her head and looked directly at the knights. They were the Reisman Knights. At a single command, they could instantly shift into battle formation. Spearmen formed the outer ring, swordsmen stood in the center, archers in the rear. Even while at rest, not a single one of them relaxed. Their nerves were taut at all times. This was the Wall of Death. Most people did not survive even a year here. Yet they were 500 men who had endured for 10 years. The fact that they were still alive was itself proof that they were the Empire's strongest knights. Joseph approached Walter, concern on his face. Still, shouldn't the lady return to the carriage? She might faint at the sight of these terrifying men. Walter answered evenly, let her be. This is her own choice. She wants to see the knight order properly. Walter looked at her. Even so, she had not fainted from the start. She did not resemble a delicate noblewoman so much as a rider contemplating her next move. A young knight stepped forward. He carried a bow on his back and looked somewhat awkward. My lady. He stopped in front of Grace and introduced himself formally. Hello, my name is Andrew Isaac. Andrew Isaac, the third son of Count Isaac and the youngest. Grace smiled in reply. It is a pleasure to meet you, Sir Andrew Isaac. Andrew's cheeks flushed red. He held out a small pouch. Please accept this. Grace accepted it. Thank you, but this is too much for me. Please keep the rest. Andrew hurriedly waved his hands. And no, that's all right. I heard that starting tomorrow, I'll be responsible for driving your carriage. You should eat more. A trace of apology showed in Grace's eyes. To make such an excellent knight serve as a coachman. I am sorry. Andrew's face turned bright red. He shook his head frantically. No, not at all. I actually enjoy driving. The surrounding knights burst into laughter. Wow, I had no idea our Andy liked driving. Andy, when we get back, our family just happens to need a coachman. Come work for us. Hey, come to my house first. Joseph, you shouldn't laugh. Joseph lowered his voice, sounding almost plaintive. Seriously, this was supposed to be kept secret. One knight muttered, making this much noise in the forest. Andy's discipline is getting worse and worse. Another knight retorted, the one lacking discipline isn't Andy. It's whoever made everyone lower their guard. Even if she is the commander's lover, she's still. Suddenly a chill swept through. The atmosphere in the camp froze. The knights stopped where they stood. Their eyes all turned in the same direction. A shape dove from the night sky, letting out a piercing shriek. Walter looked up. At last, Grace's eyes followed it. What an astonishing sound. I've heard many stories about monsters from my teacher, but this is the first time I've ever seen one with my own eyes. My lady, stay with Andrew. He drew his sword, face grave. They may attack your head. It would be best to keep your hood on while moving. Walter turned his head. His voice was steady. Don't be afraid. It will be over soon. Grace pulled her hood tighter. Andrew shielded her with his body. My lady, this way. A branch-winged monster suddenly lunged at them. Walter swung his sword and cut it down in a flash. The creature dropped to the ground. Walter shouted, move. Go! Walter's blade tore through the night, sword light crackling like lightning as he instantly slew the branch-winged monster. Grace stared, entranced. This was the strength of someone who had struggled for 10 years of the Wall of Death. Overwhelming power. But even more astonishing was Walter himself, weaving through the pack of monsters. Every swing of his sword was precise and deadly. Grace's heart skipped a beat. She instinctively clutched at her chest. It was as if a god of war had descended. Wherever he passed, nothing remained standing. They called him the god of war. A gust of wind passed, and Grace instinctively reached for her head. My hood, a monster dropped from the sky. Its hooked claws seized Grace's shoulder and yanked her violently into the air. Grace screamed in terror, her body swinging helplessly above the ground. My lady! Andrew drew his sword and roared. Let go of the lady! He drove off with both legs like an arrow loose from a bow. Andrew's sword flashed and severed the monster's wing. Grace fell toward the ground. My lady! Andrew leapt after her and caught her securely in midair, holding her tightly in his arms. He let out a breath. Thank heavens, I caught you. With Grace in his arms, Andrew plunged downward. Walter stood at the cliff's edge, staring down into the abyss below. His face was grim as he ordered the soldiers behind him. Bring rope. I'm going down. Yes, my lord. Grace jolted awake. Sir Andrew. During the fall, he had protected her with his entire body. Andrew lay beside her, his eyes tightly shut. Please, please. Trembling, Grace reached toward his chest. He's alive. Suddenly, a rustling sound came from nearby. Grace started violently. A deep growl echoed through the woods. From the shadows emerged a giant wolf, its eyes glowing with ominous red light. Walter's voice came from above the cliff. My lady, step back from Sir Andrew. She looked down at the unconscious Andrew. No, if I retreat now, Sir Andrew will die. I absolutely cannot back down. Grace's eyes turned resolute as she placed herself in front of Andrew. Walter clenched his fists. That fool. I have to protect Sir Andrew. Please, anything at all. She looked at the fallen longbow and shoulder strap nearby. She bent down, picked up the bow, drew the string, and knocked an arrow in one smooth motion. Calmly, she fixed her gaze on the giant wolf. A little closer, a little closer. The giant wolf roared and sprang, jaws yawning wide. Now! Grace released the string. The arrow tore through the air. Grace drew the bow again. One more time. Grace's arms were trembling. No, I don't have the strength to draw the bow again. Ignoring its wounds, the giant wolf lunged again. Grace's pupils contracted sharply. Fear seized him. The breath of death drew closer and closer. An overturned carriage burned in a crimson illusion. It was the deepest fear in Grace's memory. Then suddenly, a hand covered the back of his, warm and steady. Don't let go. Grace snapped back to himself. He turned his head. A familiar figure had appeared behind him. Walter. He was holding his hand. His gaze was calm and unwavering. Walter's appearance drove away the deathly illusion before Grace's eyes. That shadow that had once flashed before him felt so familiar. Now, he was enveloped by this man in an even deeper darkness. The arrow was aimed at the giant wolf, ready to strike. The arrow flew from the string, tearing through the air with a shriek as a streak of blue light shot straight at the beast. The giant wolf howled in midair. The arrow pierced through its body. It crashed heavily to the ground, silent at last. Grace let out a breath of relief. His body swayed slightly from exhaustion. It's over. Walter's hand brushed lightly over his cloak. Fortunately, the gargoyle's claws had only torn the fabric. He pulled him closer and asked softly, Are you all right? Joseph was trying to help Andrew up. Get up already, damn brat. Seriously, you're such a pain. Helplessly, he hoisted Andrew onto his back. Thank you for saving my brother. Grace asked with concern, Is Sir Andrew all right? Joseph's tone was calm. Don't worry. He's fine. Let up first. Please follow carefully. He wasn't seriously hurt by the gargoyle, just scraped up all over. His arm was cut by the bowstring too. Can you climb up? He held out both hands. Walter watched silently, a trace of surprise flashing in his eyes. What are you doing? He lifted his head and met his gaze directly. You said yourself. You're not the type who only pretends. I felt it the first time we met. It seemed like you've been planning this for a long time. Otherwise, you couldn't possibly be this calm. Walter gave a soft laugh. With a light motion, he lifted Grace onto his shoulder. Walter carried Grace. Hold on tight. Grace wrapped his arms around Walter's neck and whispered, Thank you. In the study, a man clenched the paper in his hand. I heard it failed again. For 10 years, how many assassins have we sent to kill that man? A woman placed a hand on his shoulder. Darling, calm down. It's not over yet. He slammed his fist onto the table. We have to get rid of him and return the dukedom to Henry Linco. But he just won't die. How can I sit back and do nothing? The Duke went to the wall of death with his knights at the age of 13. 10 years have passed. He learned no noble etiquette, none of the dignity a duke ought to have, nothing at all. He has never even shown his face in high society. And who has always remained by his side? Even a maid is one of ours. Yes, the master of this estate is me, Henry Linco Walter. Leaseman will never take this castle back. The Duke will rot to death in the annex, just like my grandmother. 10 years later, the Duke is finally coming back. He sat by the bed. His back was turned. How do you suppose you'll welcome His Grace the Duke? Once His Grace returns, the Marquis and Marchioness of Linco won't dare be so brazen anymore. The old woman slowly withdrew her hand. I am tired. I'm going to lie down. Don't wake me, grandmother. The old woman turned her face away. It doesn't matter anymore. It really doesn't matter anymore. The family, our glory. All of it. At sunset, golden light spilled across the land. Tents and carriages were scattered everywhere. Silence hung in the air. A foot stepped firmly onto the dusty ground. Walter looked down at the magnificent castle. At last, Grace stood in the evening sun. His gaze was calm. Walter stared at him. Finally, you've finally shaken off your personal guards. Grace looked puzzled. What? Walter gestured for him to turn around. Behind him, a group of knights stood holding flowers and gifts, all smiling brightly. They had come to greet Grace. If they weren't a noble lady's personal guard, then what were they? The Richmond Knights. Grace smiled and waved to them. Walter stood beside him, perfectly composed. The person I once said I would win over, no matter what. That was something I barely obtained after 10 years of wielding a sword on the front lines. And he got it in just a few days? Walter's gaze hardened. No, not a few days, but the crystallized blood, sweat, and tears of a long ordeal, all to become my beauty. Bathed in light, Grace looked sacred and untouchable. Your Grace, are you afraid? The two stood on the edge of a cliff, overlooking a massive black obelisk. Walter let out a low laugh. Are you the one who's afraid? Grace shook his head. Of course not. I've been waiting for this moment. Walter lowered his hand slightly. Yes, for those people wearing feathers, pretending to be blue eagles. And for that pack of wildcats, I must grant them an ending worthy of them. Grace lifted his eyes to Walter. Then from now on, please call me Grace. After all, we're lovers. You should be able to call me more intimately. For a man who has lived 10 years for revenge, words like that did not fit. You're no different from me. How can you say intimacy so easily? Grace fell silent for a moment. If even that troubles you, then we'll have a problem. I don't intend to let my guard down either. Walter's gaze was deep, as if piercing through the dusk. Walter drew Grace into his arms. He kissed the back of his hand. Grace, I will have you ride on my horse and enter Richmond Castle with me. He stared at him. You won't find even that difficult, will you? Grace looked up at him. Their eyes met, and a silent tension filled the air. Of course not, Walter. The gates of Richmond Castle slowly opened. The drawbridge was lowered to welcome its master. The sound of horns rang through the sky, announcing the return of the Lord of the Tabex Mountains and the Orutu River, cornerstone of the Deccan Empire, guardian of the Northwest. The herald cried aloud, His Grace, the Duke of Richmond, has arrived. The sound of hooves echoed over the stone road. Walter rode on horseback, his figure tall and straight. Grace rode with him on the same horse as they crossed the castle courtyard. A couple stood high above, looking down. They were the Marquis and Marchioness of Linco. Walter's gaze swept over them. Yes, it was obvious at a glance. A person raised among thieves would never mistake them. Such shamelessness was in a thief's nature. The Marchioness of Linco stood on the balcony, looking down at the two in the courtyard. Walter dismounted neatly and turned, extending his arms. He caught Grace steadily and drew him into his embrace. Their eyes met, sparks flying in the air between them. The Marchioness stared in shock. That? What is that? She clenched her teeth, her eyes full of shock and confusion. Linco, the Marchioness smiled. Welcome back, Your Grace. Walter stood side by side with Grace. He answered faintly, The Marchioness's gaze swept over Grace. I didn't know you had a guest. I'll take this young lady to the drawing room. We received no notice of your arrival, so the guest rooms may not be fully prepared. Walter cut her off. That won't be necessary. He placed a hand on Grace's shoulder. From now on, he will stay in the chandelier room. The Marchioness's voice trembled. Your Grace, that room is... Walter looked at her coldly. What's so surprising? In my castle, do I need anyone's permission? His gaze was icy and brooked no resistance. The Marchioness instantly stiffened. And no, of course not. Walter let his hand fall to his side. His tone was cold. The welcoming ceremony has gone on long enough. Everyone withdraw. He turned to Grace. Let's go. Walter extended his hand. Grace gently placed his own in it. Side by side, the two walked deeper into the castle, disappearing beyond the grand doors. The Marchioness and the servants could only stand where they were and watch. Not a word was spoken. What in the world is going on? Who is that woman he brought back? He didn't even introduce her and already wants her to stay in the late Duchess's room? Does he think he can ignore my authority like this? Is he declaring that he is the true master here? Walter, Duke of Richmond, seems to be plotting something. But don't worry, things won't go the way he wants. She turned to face everyone to the meeting room. We need to hold a meeting at once. One subordinate bowed and obeyed. Yes, my lady. Even if you are the Duke of Richmond, the Richmond estate is still entirely under my control. What happened? How could this be, Walter? Inside Richmond's resplendent hall, the crystal chandelier refracted dazzling light. Two servants stood by the door and spoke respectfully. Then we shall take our leave. The doors shut heavily. The two instantly let go of each other's hands. The fire in the hearth flickered warmly and brightly. The bed was white, soft, and spotless. Fresh lilies had been set on the table, obviously replaced just this morning. This room had clearly been in use all along, and without a doubt, the person using it had planned to spend the night here. Grace picked up a lily, his fingertips brushing the petals. A cold smile curved his lips. He had been using what did not belong to him all this time, and when it was taken back, he still dared to be angry. Walter crossed his arms, his eyes sharp. How long did you practice that performance? That nauseating act of falling in love? Grace answered softly. Acting? That wasn't practice. I simply convinced myself that in that moment, I truly had fallen in love. Walter's gaze rested on him. Is it really that simple? Grace looked back at him. It's not difficult, Your Highness. Grace smiled faintly. But since I don't know who may be listening, from now on I'll address you only as Your Highness. You are quite convincing yourself, Your Highness. Your performance made it easy for me to get into character. Walter's gaze swept over him. Likewise, by the way, I didn't see the Dowager Duchess. She's most likely in the annex. A trace of confusion flashed through Grace's eyes. The annex? What kind of place is that? Walter explained. It's where they keep those who cannot adapt to life in the main building. Grandmother. The boy wore a bright smile as he waved goodbye to his grandmother. I'll be right back. The old lady was surrounded by darkness. She called softly, Walter, where are you? Walter. The boy's voice answered clearly, Yes, grandmother. Your Highness. Why is Your Highness wearing Walter's clothes? And no, that's not right. It's Walter. Why is he wearing His Highness's clothes? The old woman shook her head trembling. No, you're not Walter. She stretched out a hand, groping through the darkness. Walter, she cried hoarsely. Give me back my Walter. She jolted awake, heart pounding. A maid's voice sounded. My lady, His Grace the Duke, has returned. The maid reported respectfully, and the young lady he brought back with him requests an audience with you. Grace Taylor lifted her teacup and took a sip. Jesse, was anyone following us to the annex? Jesse sat beside him. There was one, but he was a complete amateur. Far too obvious. I almost thought he wanted to be noticed. Grace Taylor set down his cup. I see. Clearly, they don't think I'm worth wasting a professional spy on. A man who left high society 10 years ago and lived at the wall of death, and the woman Walter Richmond suddenly brought back. I know exactly how the people of Richmond Castle will judge such a woman. A fallen noble trying to seduce the Duke, or a commoner in disguise. A woman who'll be thrown out soon enough. Someone not even worth paying attention to. And right now, that indifference is exactly what I need. Footsteps sounded. Madame Isaac stood there quietly in a black dress, her expression solemn. Grace lifted a hand slightly. Thank you. I like it very much. Madame Isaac lowered her head and reported, the Dowager Duchess refused the audience. She said you may leave. Grace Taylor's gaze sharpened. The young lady brought back by the Duke. Is that how you announced me to her? Madame Isaac answered firmly, yes. Grace Taylor lifted his chin slightly. Go back and announce me properly this time. He straightened his back, his gaze resolute. Tell her Grace of House Taylor requests an audience. The daughter of the Duke of Alta, born and begin of the Empire, married into Richmond and became Richmond's Duchess. She was once the noblest woman in the Begin Empire. The people of the Empire called her the Queen of Richmond. But that was a story of the past. A noble woman stood up and rebuked the Marchioness of Bynote. How can you treat the Duchess this way? First you stole her name, and now you're even cutting her firewood allotment. Marchioness Bynote, didn't you hear that the Duchess said she was cold? You should go see for yourself how freezing the annex is. Winter is coming, and my situation is difficult as well. Even a single log must be used sparingly. For Richmond's dignity, please endure a little longer. What did you just say? Taylor. Madam Isaac's voice held a trace of hesitation. Yes, my lady. Is that child that young lady? A blonde young lady with blue eyes? Is she the bloodline of the former Duke of Taylor? She came back to herself and asked carefully, will you see her? Did the Duke bring her here? She lowered her head and answered, yes. Send her away. She sank weakly back onto the bed. Her voice was weary but decisive. Madam Isaac, you've done enough. Go back to your room. Your sons have returned too, haven't they? You may stop sending people to be my attendants now. She bowed deeply. Please rest, my lady. I will convey your words. Footsteps echoed through the empty room, fading farther and farther away. She lowered her head and reported, she still refuses to see you. Please leave. A trace of disappointment crossed Grace's face. He sighed softly. Forgive me. Jessie stood beside Grace, worry on her face. My lady, what should we do? The Dowager Duchess's cooperation is absolutely necessary. Grace cut her off. Jessie, go back to Childert's room first. While you're at it, observe the servants' movements and the atmosphere of the estate. Jessie asked anxiously, Miss Nanina, did the plan to persuade the Dowager Duchess fail? A smile curved Grace's lips. It's all right. My plan hasn't failed yet. His gaze swept over the empty room. He asked softly, did you clean all of this yourself? Why isn't there a single maid here? And why are you the only attendant? The servant lowered her head and wiped a teacup. I believe I already told you. The Dowager Duchess ordered you to leave. Outside the window, the grass in the garden had been crudely cut, and the air was filled with the smell of rotting greenery. How is this place usually maintained? The main building is warm. So why is the annex so cold, as if there isn't even a single log for the fireplace? Why is the Queen of Richmond being treated like that? She turned to leave. Please go. Grace remained where he was. Madam Isaac, how do you feel watching your liege lady be treated that way? Weren't you waiting for an opportunity? Grace's eyes were steady. A chance to restore her to where she belongs. I'm the same. I've endured years that passed like living death. I believe you are the same, my lady. What have you prepared? Revenge. Light flashed in Grace's eyes. Madam Isaac, it's time to return Richmond to its queen. Madam, what are you doing now? We leave at once. Hope flared in Madam Isaac's eyes. My lady, help me wake the Dowager Duchess. Work with me to reclaim Richmond. If I can awaken her, if I can return Richmond to her. Madam Isaac held out her hand, her voice trembling but resolute. I would gladly offer my life. Their hands clasped tightly together. Madam Isaac, as the person who had always stood by the Queen of Richmond's side, the one most trusted by the former Duke of Richmond, had once determined the fate of countless nobles with a single word. That was why, more than the Dowager Duchess Elise, she was the person I first had to win over. Grace smiled and extended his hand. I'll look forward to working with you. Madam Isaac, sunlight streamed through the lavish room, illuminating every corner. First, find out everything about that woman. Search every inch of land near the Wall of Death. The Duke hid there for 10 whole years. Near the Wall of Death. Can someone who lived there still be called noble? And he gave the chandelier room to that sort of woman. It's an insult to us, who protected turbulent Richmond in the past. It seems they have forgotten. Richmond does not belong to the Duke alone. I must remind them personally. I will also try to shake the Duke himself. The two lowered their heads slightly. A silent understanding was reached. Flora Lewin stood by the window and thought. Walter Richmond. In the past, whenever I thought of knights, I always imagined them as rough and savage. But that man was completely different. He came walking out of an icy blue glow, tall and straight, like a king of winter nights. His expression was cold, his gaze profound. Flora rested her chin in her hand and gazed out the window. If I could stand by his side, we would surely be a match made in heaven. Her fantasy was abruptly cut short. The door flew open. The maids cried anxiously, Miss Flora. The two maids huddled together and whispered mysteriously. Do you know? We heard news about that woman. Flora asked curiously, what is it? What kind of story? The maids lowered their voices. They say that woman's background is extremely lowly. The Marchioness of Lincoln has already given orders to thoroughly search the area near the Wall of Death. She means to uncover that woman's true identity. Flora covered her mouth, the smile on her face freezing instantly. Good heavens, she came from the Wall of Death? That place full of criminals and monsters? The maids continued whispering. She must have begged for the Duke's favor just to stay in the chandelier room. And she only has one maid. There even seems to be a strange smell on that maid. A trace of contempt flashed through Flora's eyes. To give the chandelier room to a woman like that. How heartbroken the duchesses of generations past must be. The maids clustered around her. Miss Flora truly is an angel. Even in a situation like this, you're still worrying about the duchesses of generations past. Flora lightly touched her cheek with a handkerchief. Oh, really now? She placed gold coins into the maid's hand. If you hear anything else, come tell me. The maids accepted the reward delightedly. Yes, miss. We'll investigate every last detail. Flora returned alone to the window. She stared at the bouquet in her hands, her eyes turning cold. She picked up a pair of scissors and cut off a white rose. At the Duke's side should stand someone worthy of his reputation. That woman should not grow attached to this castle in the slightest. In the ducal office, Walter sat at his desk going through documents. The quill scratched softly over the paper. Walter stopped writing and picked up a document to review. Joseph stood by, waiting for orders. Joseph spoke in a low voice. Your Grace, weren't you planning to act the moment you arrived? To strike first while they were unprepared? If they become wary, do you lack confidence? Joseph turned. Not at all. Yes. Walter looked at Joseph. What is it? Joseph bowed and reported. The knights of the vassal families came to pay their respects to you, but Count Lewin drove them away at the main gate. Walter's expression darkened instantly. A one-eyed old knight roared. I'm the head of House Rodeo, loyal to Richmond for generations. I have come to pay my respects to His Grace the Duke. How dare you be so insolent? Count Lewin stood at the gate, arrogant and disdainful. In that appearance, you still think you can enter the main castle? The old knight was furious. What did you say? This is a message from the Marchioness of Linco, Count Lewin relayed coldly. Looking like a bandit as you do damages Richmond's honor. The old knight and his attendants froze in place. What? The scars earned on the battlefield, aren't they medals of honor? Count Lewin's voice echoed out. As knights, your place is outside those gates. That is where you should display your loyalty, waiting where you're needed. If you understand, then get out. He burst into laughter. You're nothing more than uninvited guests. To be honest, when I returned to Richmond, I had intended to purge them immediately. Leave none alive. Uproot them completely. Not one of them could be spared. Grace's figure surfaced in his mind, his expression earnest. You cannot do that, Your Grace. You cannot stain Richmond with blood. Only then can that power be used for you. If Richmond is tainted with bloodshed, its legitimacy in the eyes of the world will collapse. From that moment on, even a righteous act will be condemned as rebellion. Thieves may plunder as they please, but the rightful master must remain calm and dignified, forced to resolve everything through proper channels. Is that what you mean? You always make the most complicated matters sound so simple. Grace answered calmly, It isn't simple at all, Your Grace. But even so, precisely because it is difficult, it is the right path. Yes, that difficult path. Joseph, wait a little longer. They must think I spent the past 10 years wasting away. But during that time, I gained you. Joseph's voice was calm. You have already waited 10 years. Waiting a few more days will do no harm. Joseph's gaze was deep. Of course, Your Grace. Good. A knock sounded at the door. Your Grace, the Marchioness of Linco requests an audience. And a pink-clad figure appeared at the doorway. Miss Flora of House Lewin also requests to see you. Expectation glimmered in the girl's eyes. Walter was silent for a moment, quill hovering above the page. Let them in. The doors slowly opened. The two ladies appeared. The black tea in the teacups gleamed softly. The Marchioness of Linco sat upright. Once again, welcome home, Your Grace. Walter replied, Thank you, Marchioness. The Marchioness drew the pink-haired girl forward and introduced her. This is Flora, the only daughter of Count Lewin. I cherish her as though she were my own. Not only is she beautiful in appearance, but her character is elegant as well. Flora's cheeks flushed. She is diligent in embroidery, skilled in music and painting, and never neglects herself. Walter lifted his teacup and took a sip. His Grace is looking at me. Flora's heart trembled. Marchioness, I'm so embarrassed. The Marchioness of Linco laughed lightly. You're always so modest, Flora. There will never be another young lady as accomplished inside and out as you. Walter set down his teacup. So what brings you here? His tone was flat. Surely you didn't come just to repeat the words of welcome from the gate. Did you? The Marchioness of Linco touched her chin lightly. Oh, Your Grace, you only return once in 10 years. Of course that isn't enough. Many people in the estate wish to speak with you in detail, especially about the guest you brought with you. People are already talking. Who exactly is that person? Walter folded his hands, calm-faced. Grace. He is my lover. We already knew she was his mistress. What matters is that Grace has no family name. Just as expected, a low-born woman. Your Grace, forgive my frankness, but you absolutely cannot grant the Chandelier Hall to her out of private affection. That is the room of Richmond's great mistress, revered by all, even among the noblest families. Only someone who has undergone strict scrutiny is qualified to stay there. The Marchioness continued, That is the meaning of the Chandelier Hall. Walter's voice was low and clear. Marchioness. The Marchioness looked up in surprise. Walter's gaze was ice cold. What is my name? The Marchioness of Linco looked bewildered. What did you say? Walter's eyes sharpened further. Don't make me ask a second time. An invisible pressure instantly filled the entire room. The Marchioness shuddered all over. This pressure, as if from royal blood. No. Impossible. The prince died long ago in the carriage fire with the former duke and duchess. The Marchioness of Linko steadied herself. Don't be intimidated by him. The duke is only bluffing. She bowed slightly. If I offended you, then I apologize. But the position of duchess must be earned through the respect of the noble women and the inner servants. If an unworthy person remains at your side, it will severely damage Richmond's dignity. The person most suited to you is Flora, standing before you now. The Marchioness of Linko smiled. This is a loyal recommendation for Richmond's sake. I trust you will listen, Your Grace the Duke of Richmond. Walter looked at her expressionlessly. A cold smile curved his lips. She and the Empress pushed me to the brink back then, and now she dares say such things. The territorial revenue report I read earlier. Most of the income flowed straight into the pockets of the Marchioness's faction. She couldn't even be bothered to conceal the records. She truly takes me for a complete fool. That look, Walter's gaze turned cold. I'll make good use of her. He spoke. I understand exactly what you mean. That will be all for today. You may leave. The doors slowly closed. The Marchioness of Linko's eyes were full of scorn. All bluster in the end. The ones who can truly shake Richmond are us. Flora's cheeks flushed red, her heart racing. The Marchioness of Linko whispered at her ear, "The Duke's gaze on you was anything but ordinary." Flora waved her hands hurriedly. "Please don't say that. It's too embarrassing. I just knew it." In the end, she lifted her head and smiled. In that barren wasteland, his heart might have leaned towards some nameless woman. But the environment has changed, and naturally his taste will change with it. How did she imitate noble Grace so perfectly, when all they possess is their own bodies? What couldn't such low creatures do? Countless commoners struggle to force their way into noble society. But in the end, a genuine article and a forgery are forever different. The Marchioness of Linko turned. "You must visit often. Carry yourself with the dignity of a duchess, and show them that you are different by birth from those women who only pretend at elegance." Flora answered firmly, "Yes, I will. I will do everything in my power not to disgrace your Grace's glory." Her heels struck the floor, step after step. Grace stood there alone. Sunlight streamed through the window over him. The Marchioness of Linko turned her head. "Flora, remember this well. If some low-born woman of unknown origin remains by his side, who would respect the Duke then?" The Marchioness of Linko smiled. "Oh, let us see just how well she can play at noble games." Grace brushed past them without sparing them a glance. The Marchioness of Linko glared at him. "How dare you not bow your head to me?" The Marchioness shouted furiously. "If you have even a shred of shame, then walk out on your own 2 feet. The castle of the Duke of Richmond is no place for someone like you. It cannot tolerate even a single strand of your hair." How interesting. A thief talking about shame. Grace looked straight at her. "Do you know who I am?" Flora gave a soft laugh. "Of course I do. People like us can tell by instinct whether a person is low or noble." Instinct? A slight smile touched Grace's lips. "I see." He lifted the hem of his skirt, then turned to leave. "Very well. Since you won't leave on your own, I'll just have to force you out." The Marchioness of Linko shouted loudly. "Someone? Is anyone there?" A maid hurried over. "Yes, Marchioness." The Marchioness of Linko crossed her arms. From this moment on, cut off all supplies to the chandelier room. Walter's fingers tapped lightly on the desk. He stared thoughtfully at the document in his hand. Come to think of it, it's been a long time. Sunlight poured through the window into the opulent room. Is he still in the annex? Grace held a lily. That wasn't a pose rehearsed in advance. In that moment, I truly thought I had fallen in love. I once told him to take hold of me, to use me as he pleased. No, I have to arm myself, so he can't use me instead. Walter's fingers brushed over his jaw, and his eyes turned sharp. Walter's voice was low. "Look into him." Joseph turned, sword leaving its sheath. A flash of steel glinted. He shot toward the intruder like lightning. "Who are you?" "If you don't identify yourself." The intruder's lips curved. "And if I don't?" He faced the blade without the slightest fear. "Are you going to run me through?" Joseph froze. That tone, I feel like I've heard it somewhere. Walter's voice rang out. "Lower your sword, Joseph." At the sound of his voice, Joseph withdrew it. "Ah, yes." Walter's gaze settled on the intruder, his expression calm. "Did Grace send you?" He called her by name rather than lady. "Eric." A smile bloomed on Grace's face. "Eric, you're here." Eric bowed slightly. My lady. Eric lifted Grace's hand and kissed his fingertips. This is Eric Napier, Viscount Napier, a retainer of House Taylor. He is currently operating a merchant guild under a false identity. Eric Napier, at your service. He placed a hand over his chest. Please forgive my rudeness just now. Walter turned to him. And please forgive my adjutant's discourtesy. He merely sensed an uninvited guest. Eric replied with a smile. Discourtesy? Not at all. The smile at Eric's lips deepened. He looked as though he meant to tear me apart. Walter asked, how are things on the annex side? Delight showed on Grace's face. Mit Madame Ishak. She said she would help. The Dowager Duchess is close to waking as well. Walter lowered his eyes. I see. You should rest now. Grace answered obediently. Very well, Duke. He turned and left. The door closed softly. Walter turned to Joseph. Joseph, continue watching. Make sure the Viscount leaves without drawing attention. Joseph bowed his head in acknowledgement. Igriegagis. Walter stood alone by the window, his shadow stretched long by the setting sun. Walter's thoughts drifted far away. Walter, oh Walter, you used to be so warm. So warm. Walter leaned against the doorframe. A stifled sob reached him, forcing him to realize that whether he wanted it or not, simply breathing and staying alive might itself be a sin. He stood alone outside the door, his figure lonely and desolate, a sinner who survived only because the heir of Richmond gave up his life. A maid bowed. My lady, His Grace the Duke has arrived. A sinner who even stole another's name. To him, I am a criminal, exactly the same as 10 years ago. Even if furniture hasn't been moved. If anything has changed, what exactly are you doing? Just sitting here, Duke of Richmond? The castle is already overrun with rats. Shouldn't the punishment of Richmond's vassals fall to you? Grandmother, the flames consumed everything. I understand now. The person you most want to punish isn't the Marquis and Marchioness of Lincoln. It's me. The Marchioness sat upright, stirring her tea with a golden spoon. Ripples spread across the tea. The golden spoon tapped lightly against the cup, making a crisp sound. For a filthy sinner to put on such airs, she had gone mad. The spoon was hurled violently to the floor with a shrill clatter. What about the report sent to Grimm? Amai Delsvidid Trembling. It said it would take 3 months. The Marchioness's hand tightened. What did you say? The maid's voice was almost tearful, but they attached a note to the report. Because there was no signature, the investigation has become complicated. They humbly ask for your patience. Even commoners have legal surnames. And yet he has nothing. That suggests his parents, or he himself, must be criminals. The word criminal suits him perfectly. The Marchioness's fingertip traced over her lower lip, near the wall of death. It's an honor prison where criminals who broke imperial law are confined. Anger flared in the Marchioness's eyes. A swindler or a thief. In a village of fugitives, those hardly even count as crimes. They're the kind of scum who would kill for a widow. Heavens, then perhaps he is killed for money as well. Entirely possible. The Marchioness's thoughts raced. The fact that the Duke was deceived by him proves he is no ordinary sort. Perhaps he committed an even graver crime, something worse than murder. For example, being one of the Dark Elves. That foolish Duke gave the room of the great noble Duchess to a shameless criminal. This way, I can punish both of them in one stroke. A cruel smile curled at the corner of his lips. That woman might claim she is innocent or would try to prove who she is. But Listman, the inner castle is in my hands. You insolent bitch. Walter Listman, just you wait. His eyes gleamed with madness, as if he meant to make them suffer the way he once had. I'll destroy both of you completely. In a lavish room, Grace and Eric sat facing each other. Documents lay spread across the table. Grace looked over the papers with a smile. Miss, are you satisfied? Grace allowed a soft laugh. Eric, you shouldn't be asking whether I'm satisfied. With results like these, you should be asking for a reward. A trace of anticipation flickered in Eric's eyes. If I say it aloud, would you grant me anything? Grace answered without hesitation. Of course. After all, this is your achievement. There was something deep and unreadable hidden in Eric's smile. In a humble voice, he said, I merely carried out your orders, Mississippi. A complicated emotion flashed through his eyes, impossible to read. A white-haired boy stood before a gravestone, clutching a bundle of green leaves in his hands, his expression solemn. Father, don't cry. The boy turned and saw Grace Taylor standing not far away. She too was dressed in black mourning clothes. Grace Taylor's voice was gentle yet firm. Once we've taken revenge on the people who slaughtered our family, then you may cry with your head held high. After Father died, there was nothing left in my life, nothing but revenge. From that day on, whatever order you gave me, I would accomplish it by any means necessary. I never cried again before Father's grave. I took the private funds you entrusted to me and built a vast trade guild. even if that meant I rarely got to see you. Miss, I once thought I wanted nothing more. As long as I could stand by your side, I was content, until I saw you marry another man. My world collapsed in an instant. It's fine. This is all part of his plan. It's a necessary step to reclaim the Taylor family army. But if one day you become someone else's possession and never return to us, when that day comes, will I still be able to say it's fine? Eric, Grace's smile froze. Isn't it enough? Eric's gaze turned calm again. No, it's not that. This reward is already more than enough. But why do you insist on giving me a fixed share? Grace looked at him. This is a fair division, my capital and your labor. That's only right. Eric lowered his eyes. But I already belong to you. Naturally, my labor belongs to you as well. Grace's smile was warm and resolute. That is exactly why I do this. I want to properly acknowledge the efforts of my people. Eric lifted his head, his eyes shining. Miss, he rose to his feet. Your agreement with Duke Lissman will end once you reclaim the name Taylor, correct? Grace answered crisply, of course. I will return as the Duchess of Taylor, and his grace will return to the place that should have been his. Eric lowered his gaze. Yes, I understand. Suddenly, hurried footsteps sounded outside. Someone was approaching the chandelier room. Miss, be careful. The Marchioness's faction has already begun to move. They've sent people to investigate your background. They suspect you're a commoner. I managed to buy us about 3 months, and I also spread a rumor that you may have come from Fortuna Village. I'll take you to the exit, this way. Jesse pointed in another direction. No, this way. Wait, that's not the exit, that's the balcony. Jesse, take care of the Mississippi. Igriegagis, take care, sir. Eric leaped out without hesitation, his body light and effortless. He drifted down like a feather, landing steadily. His cloak billowed in the wind before settling. Joseph stared, dumbfounded. What in the world have you people been through? Hunter training. Anyway, let's hurry to the office. Aren't you supposed to be staying by my side? I need to hide these documents. You go get a book and pretend you're reading. The office door slowly opened. Grace sat at the desk, a book in her hands. 2 maids came in pushing a meal cart. We've brought your meal. The maids wheeled it into the room. We'll set everything up right away. The wheels screeched harshly against the floor. Jesse frowned deeply. They dared come in without knocking. And that cart is making far too much noise. Joseph folded his arms, his tone faintly mocking. If you're so worried, you should have stayed in the chandelier room. Jesse replied calmly, I'm not worried. After all, the princess trained with us as a hunter. Joseph looked off into the distance. What exactly is that hunter training anyway? You hide in ambush and wait for the right moment. Then you snap their necks. Is the door to the chandelier room something people can just open without the owner's permission? The 2 maids glanced at each other. One muttered under her breath, what is with him? Does he really think he owns this room? He's just a commoner like us. I heard he might even be a criminal. At the Duke's castle, the standards for maids are strict. Even a commoner must have a clean background, stable finances, and no criminals among their immediate family. And yet that man got into the castle just because the Duke favors him, and now he struts around like that. If it weren't for Miss Flora's orders, we wouldn't even be delivering a meal to that woman. He's pretty good at imitating nobles. But noble breeding includes a lot more than that. Embroidery, painting, dancing. Still, the most basic thing is table manners. No matter how elegant he acts, can he tell a steak knife from a butter knife? Watch him carefully while he eats. Your testimony, who knows? A gold coin spun through the air, glittering. Perhaps it could become decisive evidence, enough to drive that woman out. Though it hurts our pride, we have no choice. The maids pushed the cart into the room. In a cutting tone, one said, when people are hungry, they get irritable, don't they? Nobles usually dine alone. Unless there's a special occasion, they eat in their own rooms. Grace sat at the table, expression cold. One maid lifted the lid. Please enjoy. On the plate was nothing but a burnt steak. We were too busy, so we only prepared the main dish. Shall I pour you something to drink? And set your utensils out for you. Grace raised her head, her gaze as cold as a blade. Who told you to do this? The maid feigned composure. You've been saying strange things for a while now. Hurry and eat. Time passed in silence. A sneer tugged at the maid's lips. She knows nothing. She's only bluffing. Serves her right. In a falsely sweet voice, she asked, why aren't you eating? Ah, is the meat too small? The other maid chimed in. What? Noble ladies usually leave even this much behind. If you don't savor it properly and just wolf it down, that's the vulgar habit of the poor. Then a knife scraped sharply across the plate. The smiles on the maids' faces froze at once. She picked the correct steak knife. Grace drove the knife and fork into the steak. Take this away. I gave you more than enough chances to correct yourselves. Clean it up properly. The maid stared at her in terror. Jesse, you're there, aren't you? Jesse restrained the urge to overturn everything. Yes. Those maids, are they the same two who led us here earlier? Yes, those two. Grace's eyes sharpened. Follow them in secret. I want to know where they go and whom they meet. Everything. A voice echoed through the darkness. Your Highness, Crown Prince, Your Highness. Listen carefully. From now on, you must live as Walter. That is your only way to survive. If pretending to be Walter is difficult, then speak as little as possible. Bury your royal dignity deep inside. Please, Your Highness, you must live. Flames devoured everything. No, it felt as though my lungs were filled with smoke. I couldn't breathe. It wasn't me the fire swallowed. It was them. Walter jerked awake, his clothes drenched in cold sweat. He sprang up from the bed, sitting in a lavish bedroom. He covered his face with one hand, in agony. Grace sat at her desk, her quill scratching across the paper. For now, the Linko Marquis faction holds real power. Administration and finances are controlled by the Marquis himself. The inner castle is managed by the Marchioness. Military authority has fallen into Count Leuven's hands. To take back Lisman, we must reclaim those three powers. First, administrative authority. Jesse stood at the doorway. My lady, pardon the interruption. Grace looked up. Jesse lowered his hands respectfully. As you ordered, I followed the maids who served your dinner last night. Jesse's gaze drifted into memory. Two uniformed figures disappeared at the end of the corridor. I wish that vulgar girl would be thrown out already. Yes, just breathing the same air as her in this castle is disgusting. Hiding behind a door, Jessie dug her nails into her palms. How dare they? She'll be thrown out soon enough anyway. Right? What? What was that? Grace's voice turned icy. An assault? Jessie lowered her head. Yes, this is only my guess, but I heard faint sounds of beating and screams. Grace's footsteps echoed through the empty corridor. She stopped in front of Grandor. Your Grace. It's Grace. There was no answer. Grace called again softly. Your Grace. Then she pushed the door open and stepped into the opulent room. Joseph came forward. My lady, why are you here? Grace tilted her head up to look at him. Sir Joseph, I came to see His Grace the Duke, but it seems he isn't here. Joseph's gaze shifted away. Well, he probably won't show himself for the next few days. Grace studied him. Did something happen? Joseph forced a smile. No, he's just like this sometimes. He sometimes disappears for several days, as if he's become another person. He doesn't want anyone to see him. Please don't worry too much. In a few days, he'll appear again. Grace fell silent for a moment, then answered softly, I see. Understood. Walter sat alone in a vast hall. The space around him seemed twisted, as though wrapped in invisible darkness. A man in black raised a dagger at him. There was a cry of pain. The dagger slipped from the man's hand. A hand clamped hard around his throat. Walter looked down at him, his gaze frigid. Enunciating each word, he said, Listen well, spy. If you dare show your face before me again, I'll hang you. The man tore free, coughing as he stumbled backward. Walter looked at himself in the mirror. He fled as if he had seen a monster. Walter tugged at the corner of his mouth in a self-mocking smile. But then again, what difference is there between me and a monster? Even the knights who follow me call me the behind my back. Madman, the iron-blooded Duke. But how am I supposed to endure all this without losing my mind? This fear that devours the soul. This fury that burns everything. Grace pushed the door open. Your Grace. Walter's thoughts were dragged back to reality. He sat down gracefully, wrapped in a blanket. I was just looking for you. It seems coming straight to your bedchamber was the right choice. He took a step forward. Grace, how can you be so calm? Tell me, how can you be so composed? Grace's gaze remained steady. She asked softly, Do I look calm to you? She gripped the blanket around herself. Or are you asking how I endure all of this without going mad? In a single day, I imagine it dozens of times. Grace's voice echoed through the empty room. Even standing in church, facing the people who murder my parents, even that damned Empress, even while watching them occupy the Magpie's nest and treat Taylor Manor as if it were their own home. All of it, I imagine burning them to ashes. Every time those scenes return, I tell myself the same thing. I survived only by repeating one sentence over and over. He's still alive. He's still alive. You are still alive. Whenever an uncontrollable rage surged through me, whenever I fell into a bottomless pit of despair, I thought, just as I'm enduring, he must be enduring too. He will come back for the battle that sets everything right. And when that moment comes, I must become his strength. I need to grow stronger so I can fight by his side. Only then can we win that battle. For a long time, you have been my guidepost, my beacon. Her eyes shone with conviction. Staring at Walter's back, she said, Because I had you, I was able to endure. Grace looked straight at Walter. You have always been my guidepost, my beacon. Because I had you, I was able to endure. So you must endure too. I do not want only the death of our enemies. I want the Empire to remember the glorious name of Taylor once more and restore it to honor. And for that, you must become a ruler worthy of my loyalty." Walter let out a short laugh. My words may sound respectful, but because I trusted you, I've endured until now. Don't disappoint me. Isn't that what you mean?" A faint smile rose on Grace's face. Walter sat there quietly with his arms folded. The fire in the hearth crackled, lighting the splendid room. Walter broke the silence. "Then why did you come here? It seems the Linko faction wants to fray me." Walter's gaze sharpened instantly. Grace continued. "The maids who prepared my dinner yesterday were imprisoned and beaten somewhere inside the castle. Since the imprisonment and beating happened after I finished dinner, I believe they intend to pin the crime on me. Before they question my identity, they plan to trip me up first with a fabricated accusation." Walter looked at her. "Are you all right?" Grace picked up a chess piece. "From the very beginning, I was bait. If I don't take the hook, it will only cause trouble. This way, meanwhile." A piece clicked onto the chessboard. "You can now move freely, my lord." Grace smiled as if victory were already in her hands. Walter's lips curved into a knowing smile. He answered quietly, "Very well. I won't stand by and do nothing. Rest easy. It's about to get very busy." A noblewoman exclaimed, "You are truly beautiful." The late Duchess often wore that necklace as well, but only now do I feel it has found its true owner. The Marchioness gently stopped her. "Don't say such things. What if someone hears?" Flora clasped her hands together, her eyes shining with admiration. "Mother is right, Marchioness. With that necklace on, you look exactly like a queen." A soft laugh echoed through the room. "You've raised your daughter well. That's only because the Marchioness has treated her like her own." She patted the seat beside her. "Flora, come sit here." "Yes, Marchioness." The Marchioness's gaze swept over the jewels before her. "Now then, among all the jewelry in this blue room, which piece do you like best?" Boxes of ornaments lay open across the table, glittering brilliantly. "I'll give you one as well." Flora's eyes widened in astonishment. Flora's mother looked overwhelmed with gratitude. "Marchioness, you're going to give something so precious to Flora?" "I've always wanted to give Flora one, but never had the chance." These are the treasures of the Blue Room, jewels passed down from generation to generation among the Duchesses of Lisman. Their value far exceeded money. They themselves symbolized power and status. So the moment Elizabeth was locked away in the annex, she seized the key to the Blue Room. With that key, she could fasten collars around the noble women of the inner castle. Flora's mother beamed. "Marchioness, please choose something suitable for Flora, whose I could surpass yours." Her face was full of expectation. "Please guide us with your excellent taste." The Marchioness smiled faintly. "In that case, how about this?" She opened a jewelry box. Inside lay an exquisite necklace. "It will perfectly complement your eyes and hair." The Marchioness lifted the necklace. "I'll put it on you myself." She fastened the necklace around Flora's neck. "I'm giving you this necklace to announce your presence to the noble women of the inner castle." Flora's cheeks flushed pink. "It is my honor, Marchioness." The Marchioness's gaze was firm. "Yes, this way, everyone will know that even the Duchess's jewels may be chosen as I please. I, Emily Linko." The clasp snapped shut around Flora's neck with a clear click. The Marchioness stared at Flora. "You're adorable, Flora." Flora touched the necklace, smiling brightly. "That's all thanks to your good eye, Marchioness." Turning to the maids, Flora asked, "Girls, what do you think?" The maids bowed and chorused. "You look absolutely beautiful. That woman could never even dream of this." When you stood in that woman's room, did you see any jewelry or anything of value? One maid's eyes flickered. "Nothing special." The other echoed her. There was nothing. "Yesterday, I sent these girls to deliver dinner to the chandelier room." "Did you, Flora? You really are a kind child. You all work hard too. Who would want to serve such lowly food like that? It must have been exhausting." The choice made that day left behind irreversible regret. The maids suddenly began trembling all over, crying out, "Marchioness, please save us. We're so scared." One maid burst into tears. "Last night, someone dragged us away and beat us. They said if we told anyone, they would kill us." The other maid tried to stop her. "Hey!" The Marchioness gathered them into her arms. "Every child in this castle is like my own child." She gently stroked their heads. "Don't pretend everything is fine. Speak freely. I will take care of everything." Amid flame and ash, a voice echoed. "Your Highness, from now on, you must live as Walter Lisman." Countless eyes appeared around him, examining him. Only then can you survive. The roar of the crowd surged like a tide. "Long live Duke Lisman." He stood alone atop the steps. "Long live Duke Lisman." The cheers rose one after another. "Long live Duke Lisman. Long live Duke Lisman." Walter. No, you're Walter Listman, and I am his. His face was smeared away by frantic strokes, as though his identity itself were being erased. I am a mask. The mask slipped from his hand and fell into an abyss of violet light. Who am I? The mask shattered, scattering like stars. His consciousness sank into darkness. Then he woke. A single drop of water fell, sending ripples across a still surface. For a long time, you've been my beacon and my guide. Because I had you, I was able to endure all of this. So wake up, Ares. The light faded. Walter sat up in bed, pressing a hand to his forehead. He looked around. Sunlight poured into the room through the windows. The candles on the stand burned quietly. Walter covered his eyes with one hand. The sunlight stung his pupils. What a strange dream. Joseph jolted upright. When he saw who it was, his mouth fell open in shock. Why, Your Grace? Why are you here? Walter sat behind the desk with a document in hand. I'm in my own office. Is there a problem? And no, not at all. I just thought we wouldn't see you for a while. Walter set the document down. I can't stay idle forever. He tapped the desk lightly with his finger. What is it? I reviewed all the records. The finances are a mess, and half the gold bars are gone. So, Joseph, find a secluded place with no light and prepare 5 connected empty rooms. Also, his finger tapped a list. Bring every person named here. Not a single one left out. Joseph looked puzzled. Then, one person in each room? Walter answered firmly, yes. Joseph pressed on, and after we locked them in, Walter lifted his eyes to Joseph. I'm counting on you. Joseph froze. Then he turned and left the office, his footsteps echoing through the empty corridor. Joseph looked bewildered. I don't really know the full story, but all I need to do is lock them in the rooms and beat some sense into them, right? In the lush green garden, Grace and Jesse walked side by side. Grace. Walter emerged from among the flower beds. Your Grace. He stepped toward her. Are you going to the annex? Grace nodded. Yes, I intend to wait until the old madam agrees to see me. Walter bent closer. Looking down at the book in her hands, he spoke mildly. That's right. Without a book this thick, the weight would be unbearable. Grace sensed something odd. What is it? Walter abruptly changed tone. But if you only wait outside, you won't see her even if you wait for years. His finger tapped the book's cover. You may have to break into the Duke of Listman's residence. Walter raised his eyes, his gaze sharp. So break in her bedroom. If setting a fire outside won't work, then start one inside. Grace stared at him in shock. She may have lost the will to live and shut herself away like someone buried alive, but she was still Deccan, the mistress of one of the Empire's oldest houses. How could he be this reckless? Walter gave a small laugh. So what? She might get a little angry, but it would definitely get her out of bed. Grace clutched her book tightly. Your Grace, are you all right? Did you eat something strange? There was something profound hidden in Walter's smile. I've always been like this. Walter lowered his eyes. Yes, he had always been like this. A mask floated in the starry sky, like another identity hidden beneath the surface. Ares Deccan. Sunlight filtered through the leaves and fell across Grace's startled face. Then hurry and do as he said. The royal family of Deccan are stubborn and hot-tempered. Grace's pupils contracted. Walter asked calmly, do you know my name? That's right. He turned away, leaving without the slightest hesitation. Hugging the book to her chest, Grace's eyes softened with firm warmth. Do you know that name? At every moment I wanted to sink. At every moment I felt I would break. Since he survived at the edge of death, then he is worthy of that name. For me, repeating your name like an incantation is how I have lived until now. They must have felt it too, that mythic majesty of the god of war. Remembering your name is my salvation. Easier than breathing, Ares.